welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I'm an Episcopal priest, and I live here in Austin, Texas. Have had the gift of recovery since December the 27th of 1972. Very grateful to a great many people and to the God who took pity on me and introduced me to the program of AA. I do want to try to carry the message, particularly of two-way prayer and of some of these other ancillary issues that we get into here. So be sure to press the like button if you see it, subscribe, and share the message with a friend. My guest today is a good friend, Matt D. I think he holds the record for probably being on the podcast more than anybody else. He is the archivist and chief cook and bottle washer for a program called All Addicts Anonymous. He's here for what I suspect will be a two-part series. We both tend to blabber on, so I doubt we're going to get through this in an hour. And if that's the case, we'll break it up into two parts. I came across an article. As I say, Matt is the archivist for All Addicts Anonymous and sent me an article a little while back, and it really impressed me. It's called the 12-Step Ladder to God Consciousness. It's by Tom Powers Jr. So, Matt, welcome back to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about AAA and then a little bit about the author and his old man, okay?
Yes, thanks for having me again. I didn't know if I was on here the most, but I'm glad to hear
it. You have the record, buddy.
A record at that and a few other things. Yeah, so All Addicts Anonymous is a 12-step program similar to Alcoholics Anonymous and the other fellowships that comprise the Anonymous Fellowship movement. The slight difference is that instead of having a single addiction in which the 12 steps are applied to, the understanding of addiction in AAA is that it's a moving target, that it's a spiritual problem. It may present itself as alcohol at one time and then may become a food hang-up at another time. To combat that as a spiritual program, the one that was closest to the original AA program, which consisted of the 4 absolutes and the 12 steps and something we call the 10 points, which come right out of the big book, which are the actual directions on the application of the steps. It was founded by Tom Powers Sr., who was an early AA member. He got in 1941. There were probably 700 members or so at the time. He stayed sober for almost a year. He was not keen on the God thing and was incapable of staying sober on just a portion of the 12th step and the first step alone. Fell on his backside and took him about 4 years to get back into the program. The whole time he was working directly with Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob and many of the pioneers of AA, Dr. Silkworth, Shoemaker. He was very active with the fellowship and was incapable of getting it until he became a theist and eventually did. It was a pretty profound spiritual type experience he had and went through many series of shock treatments and essentially had realized that God lived deep within him and he just needed to be squeezed pretty hard to make contact, which he did. He got into AA. He took the program extremely seriously, and this is how the AAA program came about. He started to look for any obstacle that would prevent him from his contact with God, and that presented itself as smoking and then overeating and anxiety and sex and so on and so forth.
He really ran the gamut, didn't he?
He did. He really did. He was just that type that couldn't make it unless he took a full bite out of the program. His son, Tom Jr., started attending meetings with him, along with the idea of applying the program to all, well, as the steps say, in all your affairs and all the different hang-ups of your life. He also saw that the program was a way of life that he thought was too good to be just for alcoholics only. So he started to introduce himself with the permission of Bill Wilson. He started to introduce his son to AA. His son started to attend meetings. At 13, I think Bill said was the appropriate age to be introduced. Eventually, along with getting, some knowledge of the 12 steps, he also started to himself, Tom Jr., started to have some hang-ups in the area of depression and sex and drinking. And in 1964, Tom Jr. got sober. This piece that we're going to read today, he was about 9 years sober. I think it was 1973. It was published in a magazine that he and his father and several other recovering addicts had published called 24 Magazine. Probably the most famous article to come out of 24 Magazine was also written by Tom Jr. 2 years after this article was done, called Gresham's Law and Alcoholics Anonymous. You can see little hints of Gresham's Law in this piece whenever they talk about a watered down version of the program or not taking the full prescription, if you will. So there's an introduction to AAA and to both Toms.
Nice. And did you know both of them?
Yes, I did. I knew Tom Sr. I first met him in 99. I knew him for about 5 years. I would see him all the time, every day. I would have meetings with him every day. And gosh, I was even with him when he died. And Tom Jr. I worked very closely with, and I actually learned quite a bit about his father through him, and also a lot about AA through him. Although he was a young man, gosh, he remembered AA in the early 1940s, and he went fishing with Howard Wilson as a kid, and met Sam Shoemaker, and he was around the whole thing, which he mentions a little in this piece that we're going to read. But he was thoroughly indoctrinated in early AA, and I worked closely with him for a number of years.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting Tom Jr. when I visited you guys in upstate New York many years ago. He was a gracious guy.
An amazing man. He had been ill for many years.
Yes, he was ill when I met him. Yeah,
rail thin, but the guy was. He had so much spirit. My Lord. Yeah.
Yeah. It shone through him.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
Keeping him alive, I'm sure.
Yeah. God wasn't done with him. He had to point me in the right direction. So that was nice. Self-centered to the end, I guess. We're going to put this in the show notes so you guys can grab a copy and print it out or read along as we go. The format for this is going to be that I'm going to read a paragraph or two, and then I'm going to ask Matt to comment on it. So we don't know where this thing's going to go, but if we find a rabbit hole that's interesting, we're going to go down it. Okay? So come along for the ride. Get us going. The first and great commandment of the law is, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. That is some command. Just take the part about loving the Lord with all our minds. How are we going to love him when we cannot even remember him for more than a few seconds at a time as we go about our business each day? If we cannot remember God, it does very little good talking about being in conscious contact with him. There is no chance that in our normal state of spiritual sleep, we will ever just slide or drift into becoming awake to his presence. Since the way to spiritual awakening is above us, any drifting we do will just be drifting along beneath it. Talk about this awareness and this sleep, because they make a big deal of this in some of the AAA literature.
Yeah, they do. I mean, I know we've talked about this before, but the 12th step, of course, there was a change with the word spiritual experience, spiritual awakening. Maybe it was profoundly chosen. I tend to think, I don't mean to say it was fully accidental in any way. I'm sure it's inspirational, but there is this reference to awakening. Awakening is a gradation. Like there are different levels of awakening, if you will. And the understanding, from some of the things that Tom had written about Bill Wilson's spiritual experience, about Frank Buchman's spiritual experience, is that these are men who had profound experiences of awakening. Later on, both Tom and Bill, they studied the levels of awakening. There were several different sources that were inspirational to them. Dr. Morris Bookey, his book Cosmic Consciousness, particularly for Tom Sr., he studied Gurdjieff and Peter Ouspensky on levels of awakening. Those levels of awakening, there were 4 states, what they called states of consciousness. And the lowest state was sleeping sleep, which is what happens to you at night. You hope for 8 hours or more. Then there's waking sleep, which is the level of sleep that we're in as we walk around and are not conscious, as this thing makes the mention of. We're not conscious of the presence of God. We're often not conscious of ourselves. We're almost as though we're machines being kind of pulled one direction or another by one thought or another. If you could examine the thought process of an individual in this state, which most of us are in a lot of the time, it's disconnected fragments of conversations in the mind, and they're being pulled in one direction or another. No unity of will or consciousness, right?
Yeah, I know it well.
It's actually very similar to sleeping sleep in the sense that in dreams you have, there's all these disconnected things, and
Yeah.
and daydreaming is a thing that occurs during the day as well as night dreaming, But then there's self-consciousness, where you become aware of yourself, not in an egotistical sense, but you become aware of your own presence. Then there is the highest of all, and this is the thing that is in these very rare cases. This is the Brother Lawrence looking at the tree. And this is the condition that of the Mount of Transfiguration. This is this fourth state of consciousness, right? What Tom's understanding is that individuals like Bill Wilson and Frank Bookman had reached a certain level of awakening, had an experience of such a thing. You're not permanently there the rest of your life, but there is a place where there's a reprieve. There's where there's freedom from selfishness, from the menagerie of the defects of the lower person, right? And that this was a program designed for awakening, to get above that.
Each was attempting to carry to others a sense of the experience that they themselves had had. Was that fair to say? Yeah.
Yes. And it makes me think of, we had done a meeting some time ago with the piece from they were in the Himalayan mountains. You remember the piece we did on the individual who carried the man that he found on the side of the road?
Oh, yes.
There was this mention of the warmth between the one man helping to carry the other man.
Kept him alive.
Yes, it kept both members alive, and that's what this is.
Yeah. Is it hard to get to this state of consciousness by yourself completely, isn't it?
That's what this is saying. You don't slide out of it, or it's not a haphazard thing. You need an actual program that helps produce awakening.
And you need people, the right people who are awake themselves. I mean, that's the program of attraction, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing that's the power of doing this thing in a group, because if you've got 20 members, maybe you got 18 that are asleep, and you've got 2 that are helping, and one week it's Joe and the next week it's ourselves,
Right.
And then of course you have a few members that are just dead asleep, and the whole idea is we're all trying to together pull ourselves up. The Philokalia makes reference to this as a chain, right? Or even Bill Wilson's original spiritual experience, he saw it as a chain, right, of individuals. And there are people on at different times on the link above us.
Yeah, and Jung's thing of synchronicity, it's like, boy, I look back on my life, if certain individuals had not been there, I don't think I would be here today. I needed somebody who had it very intensely, and I could see it in them, and I knew that was what I needed. All right, but let's go on. But right at this point, we can take a saving lesson from ordinary life. When we need something from a high shelf, we don't give up if it is out of reach. We get a ladder. And just as there are wooden and metal ladders, which let us get up over our heads in a physical sense, there are also spiritual ladders, which enable us to get above ourselves into the level of consciousness where it is possible first to remember God, then to know Him, and finally to love Him. need a program. We need a program of some sort.
Yes, yes. We've talked about these words too in other podcasts, but the reference to the word remember, your membership, the word member is combined in this word remember.
Remember, yes.
Yes, if your hand is a member of your body, if it's cut off and it's no longer connected to the life-saving flow, it's a as Tom says, a piece of meat. It's under the law of death, right? It's going to disintegrate. Membership is to be connected in that way, and the way that you're connected is not by a physical thing, although physical things help.
You gotta bring the body.
You got to bring the body.
Yeah.
But it actually is a thing of consciousness. It's a thing of remembering.
Hopefully.
If you don't remember the program, it's of no value to you. That's what he's saying here.
Yeah.
Right? Then to remember God, then to know him. To know is this thing of to cleave to, right? In certain references, scriptural references, to know is to unite with. Like Adam knew Eve and they bore a son. It is to be that close. And then, of course, the last is to love him.
Yeah. Can't go to that first, can you?
No, first thing is to remember.
First thing is to remember. Second is to what?
Is to know.
To know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Third is to love.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Keep it simple. These special ladders are basic equipment in every real spiritual school. They consist of directions about how to live, but not just random directions. They are complete programs of instruction with all the parts interlocking and interdependent in precisely the same manner that the rungs on a physical ladder are held together. This is a way of life in a sense, isn't it?
Yes, it's a program. This is what programs are designed to do. That's what he's making reference to here, to wake us up.
Yeah. Spiritual ladders take different forms for different people in different ages. The Mosaic ladder is a series of commands. The ladder of Jesus is a group of ecstatic utterances. The Beatitudes are most accurately translated, "Oh, the bliss of the poor! Oh, the bliss of the meek! Oh, the bliss of the peacemakers," etc. The ladder of St. Benedict is a body of rules for a monastic community. The Hasidic ladder is a collection of epigrams spoken by the great rabbis of the 18th century revival in European Judaism. There are trails that have been left, eh?
Oh, yeah. They were, specifically designed, given by God for individuals at a particular time. Not that they aren't applicable through the ages, because they're beyond time.
And a particular place, too, eh?
Usually places of suffering, or places in which the result of suffering would be present, like poverty, for instance. Many of these religious groups had given up the things that would distract from making contact with awakening. Poverty is a central part of it.
They seem to be particular to a people as well. You look at the Hindu scriptures, they form you. The Jewish scriptures, they form you as a people, as a group.
Yes.
And they take you where you are, too, don't they? That seems to be the case.
Yes, many of them.
But all of these ladders are centuries old. What about our own age? Is there no ladder specially designed to fit the peculiar needs of modern man? There is one, and only one that we know of, the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Almost nobody outside of AA suspects the power the steps have to change any human life. Even within the fellowship, the full import of the steps is not widely known and is becoming less so year by year. To understand what the steps really are, we first need to know something of how they came into being. Tom and his dad were pretty convinced of the steps. So sometimes I don't know, fault me on this, but I certainly don't think they're the only way, you know. But they are a unique way because we are such an addictive society.
I guess I would say the only way really is the way to God. And it seems that throughout time, as you were saying earlier, there have been certain ways given to man, and they're peculiarly designed to meet man where he's at. And in today's age, and I think I know what you're saying. Maybe
if you can make sense of what I'm saying, Matt, I'm gonna take it. So,
well, I guess you could say, all right, the skeptic would be, okay, we're just talking about this AA thing where I go down to this meeting and there's coffee and, well, there's no more cigarette smoke, but, a bunch of people blabbing about their problems or whatever. And then we go home, and this is some kind of comparison that to the 10 Commandments of Moses.
And 6,000 years of history and all that good stuff.
Where you have to take off your shoes in order to, it's the central point is that this is a ladder given to our particular age, an age that is so beset with a kind of spiritual, intellectual arrogance, of distraction of the most profound kind. I mean, we're talking about individuals who could sit still for some time, who many couldn't even read, so they would have to recite large portions of holy texts. We don't have the consciousness nowadays with the smartphones and TikToks and everything else. We can't even pay attention for more than just a few moments. And so it is the actual aim of the 12 steps is of no difference than any of these other programs, if you will, call them that. The aim is the same. It is to be united and to make conscious contact with God Almighty, to reach a level of awakening where that becomes possible. In many cases, it may be that we fall very short of this extreme. Obviously, we're not Paul on the road to Damascus, but we are awake enough to be above the place of addictive drinking and suicidal, sex acts and a kind of selfishness that just destroys people's lives. So in one sense, you could say, oh, this seems like such an exaggeration. And in another sense, I think there's no exaggeration at all. It has the same aim and goal in mind.
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree with that fully. I do find some people say it's the only way. And that I have difficulty with. The founders wouldn't even agree with that.
No, I don't believe so. And also, if you to look at all these things, all these, I don't mean to call them things, but sacred programs.
Yeah.
There are so many throughout time for so many different persons. If God had designed one and only way, I think I would say that they are all one and the same in the way of principles. But how their application is applied and to whom they're applied to it varies, and it must. Yeah.
Yeah, it must. Okay. So let's get to the steps then. One evening, early in 1939, a man sat in the bedroom of his home in Brooklyn trying to collect his thoughts and get them on paper. He was a nobody in an ordinary setting, struggling at a task for which he had no enthusiasm that night. And yet out of his efforts came the single most powerful and practically helpful spiritual directive of our time. The words he wrote in less than an hour's time have saved the lives and the sanity of millions of men and women. The man's name was Bill Wilson. He was later to become honored, respected, and loved as co-founder of the enormously successful Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. But in 1939, AA was just an obscure group of drunks in the New York City vicinity and another in the Akron, Ohio area. The society was virtually unknown, and its future was uncertain. So we're talking about the founders, and Founders Day is just about a month or less away. Good to revisit these guys and see what condition they were in at the time. So let's take Wilson first. A nobody, drunk, down on his luck and fortune, and he was getting ready to do something very profound.
Yes. Yeah, I think that it's important to revisit. I know I keep saying this all the time because we talk about these subjects, which I'm so glad that we do. And I keep referring back to previous podcasts, but we had talked about Bill Wilson's spiritual experience, his study of William James. The understanding was that a profound spiritual experience began with ego deflation,
Right.
or that this is the beginning of it, right? And here comes this man who is thoroughly, Bill Wilson was a man of intense will. Even his name reflected it.
Oh, I never thought of that. Nice. Yeah.
I believe the original etymology of the word helm is like a helmet, is strong.
Well, that's why they named me that, too. So, got a thick head here. Yeah. And a strong will. I'll tell you that, Will.
Well, this very strong and powerful will was set out to try to beat the world, and then found himself incapable of not killing himself with a addictive toxic substance, and was completely deflated. Everything he set out to do in life, he basically was able to accomplish, and here he was unable to stop himself from destroying himself, and obviously went through this intense experience of deflation, which led to this, unbelievable spiritual experience, right? This kind of actual awakening. He felt the wind of the spirit blow through him. It was alive. And this is a man that had, through this experience, and this is the thing, what we talked about prior to this, is that a prophet is someone who has, and again, I don't mean to mix levels and say this thing is the equivalent of Moses or something of that nature.
Oh, I'm fine with that. That's all right.
A person who is, in historically speaking, a prophet or a seer is someone who has had an actual vision of God. The purpose of that vision is it's as though it's a currency to carry out a certain task. Right? They're given a certain, the vision is to do it, is to be used for a job. An actual calling was given to them. And so Wilson has this experience, and incorporated in the experience is, you're going to be fine, but you being fine is contingent on you helping others.
It's almost like two visions, or at least you can break them apart as you're doing. I think that's so important. It's not that just Wilson had this blinding white light experience. It was coupled with, now carry this out to others.
Yes, exactly. And my understanding is he believed them to be closely united, that the experience and the call to help others, and it makes a lot of sense if you go back. That strong will that we were talking about earlier is now baptized in the light of that spiritual experience and comes out with a whole new purpose as a new creation.
Yeah, he's a new man.
He's a new man.
With a new mission.
With a new mission.
Yeah.
Now, we'll touch on this a little later in the reading. Just because you have a conversion experience or an awakening doesn't mean that the work is all done by any means.
You can fall back asleep in a New York minute.
You sure can. As a matter of fact, you can really, really damage yourself in a very serious way after you've had this kind of contact with the higher.
It can lead to inflation.
You're playing with a fire, that is
right.
A higher order.
Jung says you can't identify with it. It has to flow through you. You are a channel for it. If you think you're it, that's the inflation.
Yes. And we talked about that too with like conductive, things that are conductive. If things are clean, around a conductive substance, everything is flowing through it. If dirt or some kind of wrong contact is made, it causes fire. It's damaging, and that's how this thing works too.
And to me, that's, when you get to the four absolutes, we're going to hit them pretty soon, I think. That's the purity.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's the purity.
Yeah.
Where is there
Yes.
contamination in this flow?
Yes, and that's the thing about, I'm glad you said that, because that's the thing about purity that many people don't get. They look at this thing of purity and they're like,
Sex, it's sex.
Oh, it's all sex and it's all moral and it's all, designed to take away my one joy in life and fun and to be a blue nose,
That's it.
religious type. And it's talking about purity at this high level, at this actual level, that if it's not burned up in all of the secondary, defects and addictions and so forth, was actually not burned up in resenting your boss, or it's blown through some kind of destructive sex habit or overeating or whatever, that actual fire, if you will, that life is ushered upward and towards awakening. It's like awakening is the result of, if you will, spiritually putting the plug in the jug. Like if you're not depleting yourself of this kind of life and vitality and strength that is given to you, the experience is awakening. So Wilson is sitting here and he's in the situation where he is now to carry out, what has been given to him. It is not unusual that he's extremely depressed. Many people who have come out of profound spiritual experiences they're very deflated in a certain way. To get his feet under him very often takes a long time. I understand that St. Paul, it took him 10 plus years or so. I can't remember the amount of years it took for him to get his feet under him. St. Francis, it took several years.
Yeah. You're on to an important point here. I don't want to go past it. There's a sensitivity that some souls have that if they're not in conscious contact, if they're not awake, if they're not channeling, they're prone to depression.
Yes, very much.
That's what I heard you say. That's so important because people say, well, God, I'm on this spiritual journey. Why am I feeling like I'm feeling? Because something's not flowing.
Yes. Yeah, and they're dealing with, and I don't know exactly how to say this and without confusing important subjects, but we're dealing with a power.
Yeah.
And I guess the steps make reference to it. It starts off with powerlessness, and then later it gets to where it's, the power to carry it out. We're dealing with certain strengths. We, in our sleep, believe that that the creation of that power is coming from ourselves. In a way, it is.
Yeah.
But it's the wrong self that we're identifying.
Right, that's right. That's right. This is the little s and the big S.
Yes. And so we arrogate to ourselves, and then we become, as we kind of refer to in AA a little bit, we become little gods. Right?
Yeah.
And the whole beginning of this thing is not to play God, right? Even of our own lives. So you're dealing with certain powers, and very often you will feel depleted. I think a lot of Wilson's depression, and it's documented so, and a lot of it came off of the expenditure of strength that he had used to run around the entire country to help every person he could possibly help, to give these talks, to stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning helping different alcoholics out. Like this, that comes at an expense of strength, right? It's to be depressed.
And it also does lead to inflation.
It does. And because now you have more.
I have to do it.
Yes. Now you have more strength that could be misused. As a farmer, I'm a livestock farmer, but I've done a little bit of work with pruning of apple trees and worked in some orchards and stuff. And it's like, in a way, you're working with nature, but you're trying to train the tree to do certain things it wouldn't do naturally.
Right.
And part of that process is you prune it. And anytime you make a cut, that actual place, it's susceptible to disease and so forth. But one of the things that usually happens is an actual shoot comes out of that cut. And those shoots, you have to, they're good for nothing. They bear no fruit. They will never bear fruit. And the main thing that they do is they suck vitality from the rest of the tree. If you don't stay on top of cleaning out those shoots, you will never get fruit of any significant amount. And if you do, it'll be the tiniest little apples, right? And it's almost the same thing that happens to us. We get these egotistical shoots that come out and we lose vitality.
I'm going to complicate your analogy here. Save me if I go too bad. I worked in Israel on a kibbutz many years ago, and I worked in what they called the pardes. It was the orchard. The orchard is the translation. And I knew nothing about farming and all that. From New York City, for God's sakes, rats and roaches are my area of expertise. But they taught us to you take an apple tree, as in your example. And what they would do is they would cut a piece out of the tree, cut part of the limb, just a tiny section. And then we would take a branch from a really healthy producing tree, okay, and graft it on to the trunk of the other apple tree and wrap gauze around it. And that would produce great fruit. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
It was amazing. It was amazing.
It is. It's the same principle. You're using the vitality itself, and I can't help but think of all the analogies in Christianity would be a truth, but this idea of becoming a new man, it's like
right. And then we graft ourselves onto the program to God, and if the sap is flowing, the spiritual stuff is flowing, we're good. We're good.
Yep, it's still vitality.
It's the vitality. Life, that vitality, that's the word for life, vital.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and we need that, We think we don't. We think we're fine. We got enough. We're sailing along. But unless we're plugged in, we're already in trouble.
Exactly. That's the purpose of a program. That's what we were talking about here with the ladder. It's in. The program is the means in which you're grafted in to this right use of the strength that you are given. I think it's a New Testament, but it refers to this as the role is to husband. You want to husband your strength.
So Wilson is getting ready to write the steps. He's not in a great frame of mind, and yet he's got to get it done. We'll finish up with this, and it might be a good place to stop. So Bill had been working on a book about the young and as yet unnamed movement. As each chapter was drafted, he gave it to the groups for their reactions. Oh, look out. Criticism from the New York alcoholics had been so fierce that the author, who had never before tried to write a book, was beginning to lose heart. In Bill's own words, and this is going to come from AA Comes of Age, and Tom Powers was kind of the co-author of that book, would you say, hey?
He was extremely involved with this book, yes. He did a major editorial work for it. I think he was primarily responsible for the construction design of this book.
Yeah. So let me read this, and then we'll kind of pull this to a conclusion here. The hassling over the 4 chapters already finished had really been terrific. I was exhausted. On many a day, I felt like throwing the book out the window. Finished my book, and I had that same feeling, so I wrote one, and that was it. I was in this anything but spiritual mood on the night when the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous were written. I was sore and tired clear through. I lay in bed at 182 Clinton Street with pencil in hand and with a tablet of scratch paper on my knee. I could not get my mind on the job, much less put my heart in it. But here, was one of those things that had to be done. Slowly, my mind came into some kind of focus. Since Ebby's visit to me in the fall of 1934, we had gradually evolved what was called the word-of-mouth program. Most of the basic ideas had come from the Oxford groups, William James and Dr. Silkworth. Though subject to considerable variation, it all boiled down into a pretty consistent procedure, which comprised 6 steps. These were approximately as follows. 1, we admitted we were licked, that we were powerless over alcohol. 2, we made a moral inventory of our defects or sins. 3, we confessed or shared our shortcomings with another person in confidence. 4, we made restitution to all those we had harmed by our drinking. 5, we tried to help other alcoholics with no thought of reward in money or prestige. 6, we prayed to whatever God we thought there was to practice these principles. So he had, through the Oxford group, through William James, and through Silkworth, he had the basics for what he knew he needed to do.
Yeah, this is the 6th step, and I don't think these things were written down until much later.
Right.
As they reflected on what it was that was the unwritten program, if you will, that they were practicing.
You had him, but he wanted to now make sure that slippery, sneaky alcoholics couldn't weasel their way through them. So he wanted to be really concise and exact in getting them down there.
Yes, example of the adaptability of programs for particular types.
For particular types of people.
The Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, they don't need to be approached in that kind of a spiritually sly way. They are what they are.
So this is the 12-a-log, and he wants to take these 12 and hit him over the head with it. Mm-hmm. That was his plan. It was a good plan. It was a good plan. So let's leave it there, Matt. I've only gotten to page 2 of a 7-page document in front of me, but I knew this was going to happen. No, I'm not surprised at all. That's why I knew this was going to happen once we kind of get together. So, are you able to come back next week and we can repeat or try to get a little further in this deal?
Yes.
Well, very good, very good. We, if I don't want to leave you guys hanging, if you will go to the show notes, I've put the article in the notes. I've also put a link to All Addicts Anonymous if you want to research them, see a little bit more about what they're doing. And they've got a number of meetings going on now around the world. Is that correct? Last time I looked?
Yes, we've got, online meetings and then also face-to-face type meetings. The website has a list of all the different ones. I know for sure because I help run one of them, which is the Thursday night meeting. We do read pieces just like this one. As a matter of fact, we just read this a couple of weeks ago.
That's where I saw
anybody in your audience that's interested, please come along.
Okay, well, very good. Well, Matt, I always enjoy gabbing with you. Ever since I first met you, it seems like we have a lot in common. It's been a pleasure to know you over these many years, and I thank you for the work. It's selfless and it's difficult, but you stay at it. You're out there trying to. You're working on a new book, I understand. How to Get Going? Is that going to be the name of it?
Yes. Well, it's a revision of an older book that's had many different lives, if you will, and we're trying to incorporate more of the wisdom of the pioneers into it, and really trying to do the same thing that we're talking about here, just make it applicable to the people at the particular time that they need it the most. So that's the aim.
Great. That's great. This article really did it for me, and that's why I wanted to kind of get it out there. I think it'll help people wake up a little bit. Okay, Matt, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your wisdom, strength, and hope and all that good stuff with the group. We will continue this. More will be revealed. So thank you guys for listening. God bless, and keep coming back.